pro-life at the polls, tracking results from the first primary elections since Roe versus Wade was overturned. Religious freedom. Lawmakers examine ways to help persecuted Christians in Nigeria. We're on Capitol Hill. Tragedy in Texas. New developments in the deaths of dozens of migrants near San Antonio. And giants in the faith. How the city of Rome is honoring Saints Peter and Paul. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, June 29th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul. I'm Tracy Sable. We begin tonight with new reports of vandalism against pro-life organizations. A pregnancy center in Winter Haven, Florida, was defaced with pro-abortion graffiti. At a Catholic church in New Orleans, a statue of Mary and a memorial stone for aborted babies were splattered with red paint. Churches in New York City, Indiana, Texas, and Washington state suffered similar damage. Meantime, judges in Louisiana, Utah, and Texas have temporarily blocked enforcement of state laws restricting abortion. The ruling has come following legal challenges from abortion supporters. Last week, the Supreme Court returned the regulation of abortion to the state level. While several pro-life candidates claimed victories in primary elections yesterday, the first since Roe versus Wade was overturned. In Utah, Republican Senator Mike Lee defeated two challengers. Lauren Boebert and Mary Miller won their closely watched congressional races in Colorado and Illinois. Meantime, in New York and Illinois, two pro-life Republican candidates for governor also face pro-abortion incumbents. And joining me now to discuss is Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Tom, welcome back. Always so good to see you. Both Representative Mary Miller and Representative Lauren Boebert won their primaries last night, really by a good margin. What do you think this signals?
Well, I think Mary Miller's race was actually the more significant because she was facing a Republican, Rodney Davis. That was a seat that featured an incumbent versus incumbent because of the seat that Illinois lost to redistricting. She was obviously endorsed by President Trump. Rodney Davis was a five-term congressman, was very well respected in his district, but hailed from the more establishment part of the wing, and clearly voters were more impressed by Mary Miller and her backing of President Trump and his backing of her. So I think that race sort of signals that the party is still very much Donald Trump's party, not just in red states, not just in purple states, but even in blue states like Illinois, even though this was a red district.
Yeah, and these were really the first primaries since Roe versus Wade was overturned. Tom, how much of an impact, if at all, do you think the ruling had on the primaries, and how do you see that playing out in November?
Yeah, it's tough to say that it had judge what sort of effect it had in the primaries because everybody who's running on the Republican side, for the most part, I can't think of a candidate who wasn't pro-life, and everybody on the Democratic side was pro-choice, and so I think it might have more of an impact in the general election. But again, that's still a few months away, and with the economy where it is, with inflation where it is, I suspect that those will still be the top issues when voters make their way to the polls in November. But we'll have to see, if the intensity of the debate, how long that lasts, and how top of mind it remains in the minds of voters.
Yeah, speaking of abortion, the White House is now offering resources to help women get abortions, including a site that shares information with those 15 years old and younger to help them bypass parental notification laws. I'd like to get your reaction to that.
Well, this was actually something that Phil Wegman, our White House reporter for Real Clear Politics, discovered and tweeted out. The White House was sending folks to this particular website, which had this information, this guidance for minors. Look, I think this is one of those. It's an example. It's an instance where Democrats could really overreach on the issue of abortion. These are not popular positions. Most people in America favor some sort of restrictions, particularly after the first trimester. And when you have the White House pushing things like this, when you have people like J.B. Pritzker here, we just mentioned the Illinois governor's race, he is now championing himself, putting him out there as a champion of pro-choice forces, including taxpayer funding for abortions, including no restrictions for minors. I think there's a chance that that's not where the majority of the public is, and so I think Democrats risk overreaching on an issue that they think really benefits them, but it could backfire.
Yeah, for sure. I want to switch gears here slightly, Tom. The Supreme Court reinstated Louisiana's U.S. House of Representatives district map. A judge had previously found that map likely discriminates against black voters. What more can you tell us about this and the court's ruling?
Well, I mean, the ruling just came out, and so obviously there have been legal challenges to redistricting all around the country. In places like Florida, in North Carolina, in New York, for example. This is all part of the redistricting process that took place. It's something where Republicans, Democrats for a while thought they had reached some sort of advantage. Again, the margin in the House that they are defending is very, very small. So they need every possible advantage that they can get. And this is a blow for them because this will actually, if this map, it's reinstated now, it will benefit Republicans and put them in a better position to secure a majority, which they already, pretty much have at this point. If you look at the numbers all around the country, they're in solid shape to take back the House in November. Yeah,
something else I'm going to touch on, too. Some new poll numbers came out this week. For starters, Reuters Ipsos poll has the president's approval rating hovering at about 38%, and an AP NORC poll finds that most Americans think the country is heading in the wrong direction, including about 8 in 10 Democrats. What do you make of those numbers?
So obviously Democrats are looking at the Supreme Court rulings and thinking the country is headed in the wrong direction. For that reason, Republicans are looking at the Biden administration and thinking the country is headed in the wrong direction. So you have agreement on the fact that the country's headed in the wrong direction, but from different viewpoints and for different reasons. But I think that the big overall takeaway is that Biden's approval, you mentioned 38, it's at 38 in our Real Clear Politics average. That is a new low for him. His disapproval is over 57%. That is a new high for him. And so the administration right now is, instead of turning things around, which is what Democrats need heading into election, the bottom seems to be falling out for the Biden administration. And that is a bad sign for Democrats with the election this close.
Tom, not a whole lot of time left, but curious what else you're following.
Well, I mentioned the Illinois governor's race, and since I'm situated here in Illinois, I mean, this was a real battle. Democrats played in this election to try and get Darren Bailey as the GOP nominee. He won going away very handily. And the question now is whether that was a good plan for the Democrats or a bad plan, whether it's a careful what you wish for. In this kind of environment, even in a deep blue state like Illinois, if the economy, if inflation, keep an eye on this race because there could be an upset in a deep blue state at the governor's level, whether it's here or whether it's in New York. I think Democrats who tried to manipulate primaries might find some nasty surprises come Election Day. Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Tom, as always, great to get your analysis. Thanks so much. Thank you. The persecution of Catholics and other Christians intensifies in the country of Nigeria. The Islamist terror group Boko Haram is kidnapping women and killing believers, including Catholic priests. As Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports, members of Congress are speaking out, demanding the Nigerian government change their ways.
Congress is on recess right now, yet members of the Congressional Nigerian Caucus say there is no break from the genocide taking place against Catholics and other believers in the African nation. The murders continue, and they're now calling on the State Department to step in.
I want to see the nation of Nigeria stand up to the world and say they're fighting against this violence and the killing of people who are worshiping only because they have a faith.
The increase in violence that we've seen in Nigeria recently, and in particular the horrific attacks over the past couple of months, are absolutely unconscionable.
In the past 17 months, more than 30 Christian leaders have been kidnapped or killed because of their faith. And according to Open Doors USA, more than 4,650 Christians were murdered in 2021.
The State Department is a modern-day Holocaust denier, refusing to acknowledge the bloodshed of innocents in Nigeria.
Catholic Congressman Steve Chabot, co-chair of the Congressional Nigerian Caucus, says the outright murder inside places of worship is unacceptable for any society.
The Buhari government must put a stop to this violence. It's their responsibility.
Both lawmakers have now introduced a resolution of condemnation for the acts against the people of Nigeria by the Islamist terror group Boko Haram. Besides possible sanctions, lawmakers have also reached out to the United Nations to help. Nigerian nationals who run faith-based organizations also spoke out.
And I hope that the United States will help us any way they can And you, all of you looking, will help us also so that we can really bring peace to a good country. The people of Nigeria are good.
Lawmakers tell me we as a nation are large enough to embrace all the fights for democracy and the saving of lives. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden plans to send more American troops to Europe amid the military conflict in Ukraine. That includes 2 additional F-35 fighter jet squadrons heading to the United Kingdom. The commitments come during the president's trip to the NATO Summit in Spain. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
Tracy, President Joe Biden will not return here to the White House until tomorrow, the final day of meetings with NATO, which is on the verge of expanding.
In Madrid, Spain, President Joe Biden sits alongside Turkish President Erdogan, who ended his objection to 2 more countries joining NATO.
I want to particularly thank you for what you did putting together the situation with regard to Finland and Sweden.
Earlier, President Biden and other NATO member leaders posed for pictures as they began the 2022 summit with Russia's invasion at the top of their minds. And sitting alongside NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, President Biden reinforced NATO's bond.
That NATO is strong, united, and the steps we're taking during this summit are going to further augment our collective strength.
President Biden announced the U.S. will send more troops, planes, and warships to Europe to boost NATO's rapid response force from 40,000 to 300,000 soldiers.
Тактика Росії дуже проста. Вона знищує все.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the Defense Alliance via video, urging them to provide more help and more weapons, hoping to break what he says is Russia's artillery advantage. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin attending the Caspian Summit. It's the first time he's appeared at a summit like this since the military conflict in Ukraine began. And on the sidelines of the NATO summit, President Biden met with South Korea's president and Japan's prime minister discussing their concerns about North Korea's evolving nuclear and missile threats. While back in the U.S., days after the landmark Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, President Biden renews his pushback against Republicans, writing, "Folks, let's get one thing straight. The ultra-mega agenda has always been about taking away women's rights in every single state."
But Republicans blame President Biden for trying to take away parental rights. They write in a tweet, the Biden administration is telling children younger than 15 years old how to obtain abortions by bypassing parental notification. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, a closer look at the deaths of more than 50 migrants near the U.S. southern border. The death toll continues to rise among the migrants who were trapped in a truck near San Antonio, Texas. 3 more people have died, bringing the total to 53. The CEO of Catholic Charities in San Antonio says that he visited with one of the survivors.
We asked her if she was from Guatemala because we have been told that there were people from Guatemala, and she actually nodded yes. So she was able to communicate, but we saw also that she was weak, so we also didn't want to bother her a lot.
9 others remain hospitalized with heat-related illnesses. It is believed to be the nation's deadliest smuggling episode at the U.S. southern border. And joining us now to discuss is Alfonso Aguilar, president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. Alfonso, great to see you. Let's talk more about this horrific tragedy. Your thoughts, and do you think this was preventable?
Well, first of all, it's devastating. This is perhaps the worst tragedy at the border in our history. And I do think it's preventable. I think by undoing the common sense border security measures that the Trump administration put in place, this administration, the Biden administration, is encouraged this massive movements of people. And it is this massive flows that create an environment of crime. So you have criminals taking advantage of people, trafficking children, people who are very irresponsible. Look what happened here. Apparently the driver was on meth and drugs. This is the environment that not enforcing the law creates. So I do believe that this is a responsibility, a direct responsibility of the Biden administration policies towards the border. And it's ironic because President Biden said that he wanted to create a moral and humane immigration system. This is not moral and humane. He's unleashed a humanitarian crisis. And it's not only me saying it, it's presidents in Central America, the president of Mexico, the president of Guatemala saying that once the president at the beginning said that the U.S. would welcome people, and once they started dismantling policies like remaining Mexico, not continuing to build the border fence along the southern border, that encouraged people, that incentivized people to make this very dangerous trek. And it doesn't matter that now they're saying, at least verbally, don't come. People see the policies and they know that they have a good chance, if they make it to the southern border, to enter illegally, or if they surrender to authorities to ask for asylum and be let in. So that's why so many people are coming. And this massive flow, as I've said, creates an environment of crime. And it's trafficking of children as well. There are studies that show that perhaps over 60% of women and girls are victims of sexual assault and rape. This is the reality of what is happening, and it's certainly not humane.
Yeah, and you mentioned that driver being high on meth. 3 people, including the driver, were arrested. Now, we don't know where that driver got the drugs, but we do know that a record number of illegal drugs are coming over the southern border, in particular fentanyl, which is deadly. Let's talk about that and the dangers of it.
Well, and Governor Abbott of Texas has been very vocal about this. We have a fentanyl crisis in the country that's taking lives throughout the U.S. The bulk of it is coming through the southern border. When you have the border, first of all, you don't have physical barriers anymore, right? They think that that's inhumane. Well, it dissuaded people from making this dangerous trek. But we also have, instead of having the border patrol officials monitoring the border, ensuring that they detain people, enforcing the law, now we have them processing people, receiving people, processing them, and then letting them into the country, because that's the policy of this administration. We don't have the manpower focused on enforcing the law. That's why this is happening. So people are able to enter illegally. It's easier to traffic drugs, fentanyl, through the southern border, and it's a very dangerous situation. It creates a humanitarian situation for the migrants themselves who are coming here, but also for Americans, because drugs are coming in, like fentanyl, and we have this terrible health crisis. This is a dereliction of duty. They're not enforcing the law. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They do have a mandate, a legal mandate, and they're just being totally irresponsible.
Yeah, we have about a minute left or so, but I want to talk about this, and you brought up Remain in Mexico. The Supreme Court is about ready to issue the ruling on that. What do you expect will come out of that, and what would you like to see happen ultimately?
Well, Remain in Mexico is an essential measure to deal with all these people that are coming here to seek asylum. We know there is asylum abuse. The majority of people asking for asylum do not have a legitimate claim to asylum. So Remain in Mexico is important because it told people, if you're going to ask for asylum, you're going to have to wait in Mexico while the case is being adjudicated. And that served to dissuade a lot of people not to make the trip, because they don't want to wait in Mexico. They want to enter the United States. So it certainly helped to dissuade people from making the trip. I believe that the Supreme Court could very well validate the policy. The Biden administration didn't follow the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. This is an essential part of our policy to dissuade people from making it to the border. Not the only solution, but in coordination, in conjunction with other policies, it certainly helped dissuade people from making the trip to the southern border. Remember that Trump administration was able to achieve operational control of the border. They had a surge of migrants in 2019. They put these measures in place. In collaboration with the government of Mexico, they were able to control the border. That's what we need right now, and hopefully the Remain in Mexico will be validated.
Yeah, such a huge issue. I wish we had more time, but Alfonso, thank you so much for coming on. I always appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, a report from Rome on the celebrations there to honor Saints Peter and Paul. Plus, Pope Francis says following Christ is not a walk in the park. We'll explain. All Our reports say Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi received Holy Communion during Mass today at the Vatican. Pelosi has been banned from receiving communion in her home diocese, the Archdiocese of San Francisco, because of her support for abortion. Nancy Pelosi is in Rome on a family vacation. The Holy Father reminds the faithful that following Christ is not a walk in the park.
Per nessuno di noi, né per Pietro, né per Paolo, per nessun cristiano.
At an address on the feast of Saints Peter and Paul, the Holy Father said following Christ can be demanding. There will be tough times and we'll be tempted to lose our way. Yet these times also are a reminder to turn to our Lord and never lose faith. Finally tonight, as we mentioned earlier today, the church remembers Saints Peter and Paul. Tradition holds that both were martyred in Rome, and in the Eternal City, the day is full of tributes to its two patron saints. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Thonhauser has more.
Rome celebrates its patron saints Peter and Paul today. The Roman holiday is an important liturgical feast and honors the two apostles who suffered martyrdom here. This celebration is one of the oldest examples of the transformation of a pagan festival into a Christian one. June 29th is the date chosen to remember the two apostles and was originally a feast in honor of Romulus and Remus, the two brothers who founded Rome. Christians decided to celebrate the founders of the new Rome, Christian Rome, on that same day.
I santi Pietro e Paolo che festeggiamo oggi
As Pope Francis affirmed, the city has special affection and gratitude for these men of God who came from a distant land to proclaim, at the cost of their lives, the gospel of Christ. The legacy of these two apostles is a call to live the Christian virtues, especially faith and charity. Peter and Paul did not die at the same time, but they're united by the fact that both died as martyrs. Peter was crucified upside down, while Paul was beheaded. Peter, in fact, arrived in Rome around the year 50 and began preaching the teachings of his master. Having escaped the persecutions of Nero, he was later persuaded by Jesus himself to repent and suffer martyrdom. He served as the church's first pope, and around the year 67, the saint was crucified upside down at the request of Peter himself, as he did not believe he deserved the same fate as Christ. The present Vatican Basilica stands on top of Peter's tomb. Born with the name Saul, St. Paul's story is different. He converted to Christianity while on his way from Jerusalem to Damascus to suppress Christians in the city. Suddenly, he was enveloped by a powerful light, and a voice, that of God, asked him why he was persecuting him. Such light blinded him and forced him to wander for 3 days in the Syrian city until he was healed by the leader of the small Christian community. From that moment, St. Paul began the work of Christian evangelization. If Peter was chosen by Christ himself to be the head of the nascent church, Paul embodies the missionary soul of the new church. In fact, the two saints represent the continuity of the apostolic mission initiated by Jesus Christ in a fundamental era for the establishment of the principles of Christianity in the pagan world. Today's solemnity of St. Peter and Paul was a public holiday in Italy until March 1977, when it was transformed as the patronal feast day for the city of Rome. On this feast day, the Pope normally celebrates a holy mass with the blessing of the pallium for the new metropolitan archbishops. He then recites the Angelus prayer. Another characteristic event of the day is the splendid Infiorata in Via della Conciliazione, a traditional floral decoration dating back to 1625 during the pontificate of Pope Urban VII. In Rome, Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.